Oh,
Hello.
good to see you, Karen. I'm excited to be live today. How are you today?
I'm doing great, although it's a little bit cold over here in the UK, so I don't like that. But yeah, good day.
That is great. All right, I'm checking our group to make sure we're live. We got today, here we are. Today we're doing a special Q&A coaching ask me anything session on how to grow an audience of eager buyers and get more leads and sales from your podcast by following our unique virtual ATM model that we have. And this is perfect for everybody, right, Karen? Today we got a lot of questions from people that haven't launched yet, and from people that have launched but maybe they're not getting an ROI. So, what do you think? Should we just like dive in and go full
Yeah,
on sniper mode on these and just knock them out?
absolutely. Yeah, let's get straight to it. What do
All
they need
right.
help with?
So for those of you watching, if you want to, you can drop them in the chat, and hopefully they'll pop into our screen here and we'll answer. We got a lot already that we were submitted, so we're going to make sure we get your questions. And then we are going to, they've got some other questions that came in as well. I'm going to read through. So I'm going to start off with one that I really liked that came into the group. We'll take care of our group folks here. Let me just find it for us. So this is a really good question, and it's one that comes up a lot, Karen. And for those of you watching too, real quick, can I just share this real quick? Let me just jump in. If you don't know, if you want to come get coaching one-on-one and get your questions answered, challenges solved in a live setting, like directly with us in a Zoom, we're going to be doing that next week, right, Karen? So I'm going to show this real quick just so folks can see it, and then we'll dive in. But you can come to podcastsalesmachine.com and join us at Podcast Profits Unleashed next week. So go ahead and grab a ticket there. Write that down now. We'll pop it up later too, but I wanted to throw that in now because I know a lot of people are watching the replay and they may be thinking, gosh, I wish I could have asked my question. Well, you can come get all your questions answered at Podcast Profits Unleashed next week, right, Karen?
Yeah, can't wait. Looking forward to that one.
All right. So enough of that. Let's dive into our first question. This is one that I enjoyed, and I think it's a really good one. It's from Danielle, and she said, how do I land? Her question is how to land the right podcast to guest on. How to land the right podcast to guest on, and how many to do in a month. So there's a couple of questions there. So I'll start, and then I'll throw it to you too, Karen, if it's okay. Because the first thing I want to point out is that I love how she framed this question. How do I land the right podcast to go on? And we recently just did a training in Podcast Profit School around this, something that I've developed called the Stealth Stalker method, which everybody just loved that day when we did it. So here's what I'm going to do. You know what? I'm going to make up the rules as we go. Here's what I'm going to do. If you comment on, one of the posts where you're watching this, you go get a ticket, free ticket, VIP ticket at podcastsalesmachine.com. Come to Podcast Profits Unleashed next week. If you go grab your ticket and comment and let me know, say, got my ticket, and I can have our team. I know nobody out there is going to say, none of you out there are going to like try to pull the wool over our eyes, right, and trick us. But we'll make sure that you did get your ticket. What I'll do is I will give you that video because I cannot explain the strategy without showing you the video. And when you see it, it's going to be mind blowing. But so that's what I wanted to share. So real quick, the right podcast. That's the key. You want to make sure you're getting on the right podcast that have your ideal dream clients, right, Karen? So the question is, how do you do that? Do you have any tips around that? And then I'll jump in.
Well, I mean, like you say, it's about getting on the right one. So who is in alignment with what you're doing or that complements it in some way so that you can, what you're going to be talking about is going to connect with those. But also it's going to be down to, well, how big is their audience? You want to check out, is it going to be worth your time, energy, getting on that particular podcast? So you need to check out where they're at. And you do have a sneaky little website that people can go to check them out, right, Evans? But is that what you're going to give them if they actually go and get their ticket?
Yeah. I'll give them the video. I'll give them the actual training that our people paid for in Podcast Profit School. It's part of the training, but I'll give them that training. But yeah, you can use the website you're speaking of is Listen Notes, but it's a lot deeper. There's an actual specific strategy, a way to do it, to save time, to save energy. You can even train your VA or your assistant to do this as well. And you can identify not only the right shows by following this stealth stalker method, but also you can get in there and find shows that are that the guests, the people that are listening to those shows are listening to these others. So you can start to use the algorithm to feed you more shows. So one thing that I would add to this question, and then we'll jump on to the next one too, is that always lead with service, right? You can find all the perfect shows in the row to get on, in the world to get on as a podcaster, but how do you get on them? And the big mistake that I see, and how many of you have noticed this before too, if you have a podcast, do you get those emails all the time that say, hey, I have the perfect guest for you. The person is blah, 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 and they do this thing and they do that thing, and they got all these shiny trophies and all this and that and the other. And by the way, they don't even speak to any topics that your podcast is related to, but wouldn't you love to have them as a guest? Right? Who is paying these agencies to do that is my question, because you're wasting your money. Because I'm getting messages all the time, like from people that are dentists wanting to get on a podcast that I don't even have anymore, that wasn't even related to dentistry. Right. So, but my point is that lead with service. How about I'll give you a couple tips. One thing you can do is go listen to their podcast. Make sure it aligns with you, like Karen was saying. Find something that's relatable. Go look at their episodes and find the popular episodes. See what their listeners are really enjoying. And when you can identify some of those episodes, the top most listened to ones, find a way that you can offer something that's complementary, a topic that's complementary to the topics that the listeners on their show already love. And then reach out leading with service. Say, hey, I'd love to serve your audience. I noticed that these were some of the most popular topics. I speak on XYZ, which is related to, the second most popular topic you've ever shared. Would you like me to come on and share my point of view around that? Because I know from the numbers, your listeners will enjoy it, right? That shows that you listen to their show, that you care more about their listeners than yourself, and that you want to help them grow their audience by speaking on topics that are more exciting to their audience. So that would be my tip on that one, Karen. Why don't we jump to the next one? I got another one that was really good that came in. And this is one that is near and dear, but it says, what is the number one thing? I always like these. The number one thing, because I have an answer for this one. What is the number one thing you would tell consultants, coaches, experts, business owners, entrepreneurs that have podcasts to do to get more clients from their podcast? What is the number one thing? We could go a lot of different ways, but can I?
Yeah, dive in, Evans. Dive in, and then I'll add to it.
Okay. Speaking from experience, right? I remember when we had our previous show and we were like struggling to grow our audience, to get leads, to get sales. How many of you have experienced that in your podcast? And you and I both know, Karen, if you're an entrepreneur or business owner at the podcast, you want to get an ROI, right? So when we were about to just say, okay, this just can't be done, we stopped focusing on 90% of the things. We pruned a lot of things. We simplified. And do you know what we did? And it was not focusing on sales, right? It was not focusing on the dollar part. It was focusing on getting leads. So what I would tell people is, and you will not hear this in the market. I cannot understand it, why all these different podcast coaches, consultants, and I'm not saying anybody's better than anybody else, but they're just not speaking to it. And I think it's because they don't understand how to do it as well as some other people, right? And getting leads from your podcast can be a game changer. It's what helped us go to $500,000 in 12 months, was to stop selling and to focus on leads, but from a relationship way of doing it versus a transactional. We created something that we call a lead experience, which is more of a journey. It's more of a chance for you and the lead to get to know each other. And the lead's one of your listeners. They already know, like, and trust you a little bit. Imagine if you can now deepen that connection and that relationship with them and allow them to work with you instead of you having to chase, close, convert, that different type of energy. So for me, for those of you watching, if you have a podcast and you're a business owner, entrepreneur, whatever you call yourself, coach, consultant, but you want to monetize that podcast and get more clients, get more sales, don't focus on getting more clients and get more sales. That seems really weird, but focus on getting leads. So I'll throw it to you, Karen. So that's my number one thing, is focus on the lead and do it the right way. Do it the right way.
Totally agree, because we weren't doing that. As you know, Evans, we were not doing that. My podcast was very disjointed to what we were actually doing. And all it needed was some very simple tweaks to then use that as the vehicle to actually drive leads into the business. And it's completely changed everything. And I don't know why we didn't think about it earlier.
Yeah.
So thank you, Evans.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Yes. And I think it's because, and we didn't either at the time. And I think it's because I actually heard some people, some like really smarty pants folks one time that I looked up to, who were very successful entrepreneurs, that say you can't get leads from podcasts. And so what we did was we went out and basically created something that got us a 78.6% opt-in rate from our podcast listeners. So we were trying to, like, okay, they tell us we can't do it, we're going to figure out how to do it. So there is a way, but the way is by doing it the right way. So that's one. And I want to go to this too, because there was a question from another person in the group that goes to this, and it was around the call to action. So we're talking about leads, right? So how many calls to action do I need to be doing in my podcast, and what kind of calls to action are good, right? So I don't know about you, Karen, but I don't like listening to something that interrupts me every 5 seconds with an advertisement.
No. And I don't think many listeners of podcasts will appreciate that either.
Yeah. And there's a little bit of proof out there in the market that they don't. It's called streaming services, right? How many people are why did they invent technology that removed commercials from television, right? Why, like the TiVo or whatever that thing was called back then, but then came the Netflix and streaming, where people were jumping on, where they could binge and watch the show without being interrupted. Why do we think as podcasting entrepreneurs that our listeners want the opposite of what they're actually saying that they don't want? So, and we did this wrong too. I've done it wrong in the past before, and we heard from our listeners and we listened to them, acknowledged it, said we'd stop doing it. So to answer this question from the group, how many do you need? What we often recommend is to have, like, one at the very front, one at the very end, make them very nice, tight, very results driven. What kind should they be? What's really good? A results driven one, right? Aspirational future. Where does your listener wish to go? Who do they wish to be? How do they wish to get there? And what do they wish it to look like when they get there? If you can speak to that in your call to action in a really short 10 to 15 second little snippet, which we actually have an AI tool that'll create that for you, which is really cool. But if you can do that, then it's a game changer because people will quickly go. But there's also, can I give them like a little bonus here, Karen?
Go for it, Evans.
When it comes to calls to action, what many people miss out on, and we discovered this by actually taking chances and trying new I highly recommend for those of you watching, just take chances, do new things, right? If it sounds new, if it may be like, well, other people aren't doing this, but it feels aligned with what you want to try it, because you never know it'll work. We never would have gotten that 78.6% opt-in rate if we wouldn't have listened to our own intuition and just taken a chance, and it changed our business forever. But what I was going to say is, one thing that we noticed, the way we went from, getting a lot of conversions on the landing page to increasing the volume from our calls to action, it was by using texting. Just using texting, right? And imagine if you actually think about the listener as what is the golden rule, right? You want to treat others the way you wish to be treated. Well, it's the same thing with our listeners, right? How do our listeners engage with their podcast? Usually it's on one of these little things where I'm reading these questions, right? A phone. They can text while they continue to listen. So you don't have to interrupt the flow of your podcast, and you can throw out a text number with a short code and they can quickly opt in. And we actually have a way that we always joke, Karen, I know I've shared this with you many times when we've talked about it, that the no opt-in method, where it feels even better just to text without having to fill out a form. And it will increase the volume of your lead. So to me, those are the two things that answer that question would be, how many should you do? Not a lot, but I can give you a way to sneak some other one. Let's just double down on this, because I'll ask you this, Karen. Have you ever heard of like seeding, right? Like seeding your messaging, seeding your podcast, you seed your garden when you want to like plant things, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you want to plant in the mind of your listener that you have something really cool that they might want to get a hold of, then you can sort of drop it in the content casually, maybe almost like I did just a few minutes ago when I said we have an AI tool that creates that. And then I just kept going, right? So you can actually drop some seeds for your listeners throughout the episode, solo or even interviews, if you do it the right way and it's natural, and it'll start to create desire for the next step. And the desire is the thing for the next step, is the thing that actually gets the opt-ins at a higher percentage. Wouldn't you agree? It's not your landing page and all that nonsense.
Oh, absolutely. Well, using the way you structure your whole podcast, really, in a way, is the way to sort of drip feed little bits of information to bring them into your world anyway. So you've got to be doing it throughout the content. And if you really want to, add an ad for your program or for people to actually give their name and email to you for something in return, beginning and end. And I love the idea about the no opt-in, and that is something that we have only just started adding to our podcast as well, for people to text, because again, it's all these little tips, Evans. You've got all these little nuggets, these golden nuggets that you go, oh yeah, why haven't I been doing that? And then it's really easy to just add them into what you're currently doing. So yeah, great stuff.
Yeah, I love it. And that's a great point too. It's about the whole, I think many people miss that they think that it's like, well, if I just have this hack, this shortcut, this one tactic, but it's the overall way that you structure it. Like you said, it's like an overall system, and it's not complicated, but it's just knowing from front to end the way to move people through this sort of journey. So I've got one that I know is near and dear to you that came in that I'll ask. It's like a two-part question in one, but they asked, this is from someone who hasn't started, who's thinking about launching a podcast, and smartly was like, hey, I want to launch, but I want to launch with a strategy in place to actually grow my audience, get leads and get sales, instead of finding myself 6 months down the road like, oh my gosh, this is a liability. It's not really bringing an ROI to my business. But the question was like, aren't there too many podcasts already? Aren't there too
No.
many podcasts out there already? And why should people even listen to me? Because there are so many podcasts out there. So what do you think about that? Share. Because I knew that I saw you just lit up. I knew this was going to be a question for you that you would love.
Yeah, well, I mean, number one, no, this is the right. If there was ever a right time to start a podcast, I would say it's now. I mean, we know they're saying that next year, I think, what are the current stats? I know I saw a while ago that it's going to be 4 billion by 2024. 4 billion. So no. Everybody has a story. Everybody has something of value to give. Having a podcast for me is just being a way to bring people into your world without jumping on a discovery call with somebody who isn't maybe a good fit for your business, because when they do jump on a call, they're in a slightly anxious state because they don't want to be sold to. And the beauty is that your podcast is a way to move people from a state of anxiety or fear to a more of a neutral position, because you're not trying to sell them anything. So you're building on the know, like, and trust. And look, I get it. When I started, I felt like, well, why is anybody going to listen to me? Who am I? And yeah, in the beginning, I was only doing interviewing. So actually, for me, I felt safer because I was holding space. I was holding a safe space for my guests. And then as you do it, you gain the confidence. And as your numbers grow, you realize that, oh, well, there are people that are listening, but you don't even have to take any rejection, because you know what? The people that are resonating with you are your listeners. So, everybody has a voice. And there will be people out there that are going to listen to you. So that is, I would say, that's a little bit of imposter syndrome that we all go through. We all go through, but it's just about taking that first step.
Yeah, I love that. And I agree with you 100%. How many of you have felt a little imposter syndrome before? It's okay. Even the most successful people feel it. You guys can admit it. Those of you that are doing really well, every time you go to a new level, you have a little bit more that creeps in. Am I worthy of this level? And it's something that we all go through. So you're not alone in that case. And I would say too, as well, that, if you are your authentic self and you try to be yourself and nobody else, you will have an audience. You will have people that want to listen to you. And here's the thing for everybody too. I use this analogy quite often in one of our virtual events. Who knows, if you come to Podcast Profits Unleashed, I might use it there and tell the full story. You can get tickets at podcastsalesmachine.com, right, Karen? So I'm going to throw that back in there now, because I'm sure people are tired of reading the same thing over and over and over. But what I was going to say is that I often use this analogy where if you want to climb Mount Everest, it doesn't even have to be Mount Everest, just a big mountain. That's the first one I could think of. You decide you're going to climb Mount Everest, right? So you're ready to go. You've never done this before, right? So you're new, but you've been working out, you've been training, you've been doing the things, you've been reading, you got all the gear, you got everything you need. And you hired this person to help you climb Mount Everest. And there they are standing at the top of Mount Everest, and you're at the very bottom, and they got their megaphone yelling at you. You got this, Karen. Come on, you can do it, right? People don't want that, right? You want the guide. You want the Sherpa. You want that person who's going to be a few steps ahead of you. That's why people hire the Sherpas to go up the mountain with them. They don't hire some dude to be standing at the top who's reached the peak yelling at them. They want the person that's just a few steps ahead of them, right? So if you think of that from your podcast experience, if you're a little bit leery about, I know I should probably start shining my expertise by either launching my own show or shifting from all interviews and doing solos so people recognize me as the expert I am, start to think of yourself as like, you know what? You just have to be the guide to the right people. Be your authentic self, be a few steps ahead of people, know some of the pitfalls that they may run into, some of the obstacles that they may hit, and just speak to that and help them out. Right. So, and that goes to the other question that I saw in here is like, what will I talk about? Well, you can talk about your journey, but you want to talk about your journey, wouldn't you agree, Karen? Not from a place of I did this, I did that, but from a place of helping people sort of overcome those objections or overcome those obstacles and overcome those things that maybe you know they will face if they're a few steps behind you. And a lot of times, if you think of who was I a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, how would I speak to myself 3 years ago, knowing where I am now and what I went through to get here, and then speak to that person who's listening as if that was you, then that's how you can easily create content. But what we often teach people too, Karen, is like, look at your ideal. If you want to get more leads and get more sales from your podcast, as well as serve people, look at where they are, listen to all the things they're telling you on calls when you get on calls with people, whatever the objections are, whatever the false beliefs are that they're struggling with. Create stories and scenarios, client stories that, and speak to those objections, help them overcome those in the podcast episode. Because this goes back to what you were saying. It's one big system. Overcome those in the episode so that when they become a lead now, where you overcome some more and they come over into your world to buy with you, not only have they gone through this process where they've overcome all these objections and false beliefs because you've helped them, but you've also helped transform their identity so that they can be successful with your program. And that's where the real power that most people are missing out on. Wouldn't you agree?
100%. Because again, it's not you telling somebody this is what you need. What it is throughout your episode, because you're choosing maybe specific pain points, you're actually demonstrating your ability at helping that person without being sales and pushy. So the listener comes to the conclusion themselves that, this is the right person that can help me go from A to B. In whatever niche, it doesn't matter what niche you're in, it doesn't matter what business you're in. If you follow that formula, you will never run out of content, and you will have this way to move a person that's bit nervous, bit anxious, and you will move them to a place of neutral first, and then keep moving them until they come to the conclusion that actually you're the right fit for them. So it's just the easiest way to do things. It's the easiest way to run your business. And, hindsight's a wonderful thing, Evans. If I just think, where could I have been if I'd met you a year ago? Because I'd been doing it wrong for a very long time. Well, when I say doing it wrong, I didn't have a specific strategy when I started. And it's just simplified everything for us with our whole business, with doing it in this way.
I love that. Yeah, it's a simplified, streamlined system that, as my former business partner and client at one point before we became business partners said, it's like, this isn't, he actually gave it the nickname where he said, you've created this streamlined system that runs on autopilot. So it's almost like I can just do what I love to do, which is just serve my audience, to get my message out there, to change lives, to go and do my coaching calls, my consulting, whatever it is over here. And the system that's been created with my podcast as the engine, it's like it's turned it into a virtual ATM that, deposits high ticket dream clients, and I can withdraw high profit payouts 24/7. And it's like something that exactly like you mentioned, it's a system. So I want to go to another, while we're talking a little bit about this, because we just talked about high ticket sales, here's a big false belief that's in the market. And we got a question on this too. hear it all the time. You may have heard this too, Karen, I'm sure, but how many of you, when you think of one, we're going to throw the sponsorship part out, right? Because a lot of people, how many of you, like when you think of monetization, you often hear like, well, you got to have a big audience to get sponsors. We're not talking about sponsoring you. You know, well, we are. We're talking about sponsoring you. You sponsor yourself is our go sponsor yourself in your podcast. Make it, this is your business, not somebody else's. You want to treat your clients in a way where you're helping them have those epiphanies, like Karen was just sharing, and help transform their lives. But sponsor yourself. But here's the big question, the big false belief when it comes to high ticket sales from podcasts. Well, yeah, I don't really want to feel sort of sleazy and pitchy selling my guests all the time. Am I going to have to sell my services to my guests? And I'm going to just go ahead and say, not with this method that we use, right? It's like, and I will ask you this. Do you want to have a sales job or do you want to have a business? Do you want to have a sales job or do you want to have a business? If you want to be a salesperson and have a sales job, that's okay, right? But if you want to have a business, then you need to shift from thinking selling to my guest and selling one to many. Your audience are your prospects and your clients, right? They are showing up to listen to you. You're transforming their lives. You're helping them come to the conclusion that they want to work with you. And it's a much bigger pool. Now, I will say this. I find it more abundant. We were talking about this earlier. Today's December 8th. I saw the number 8. It reminded me of abundance. So I find it a much more abundant approach. Wouldn't those of you listening agree or watching if you sold with your guests? Don't you think there'd be more opportunity if we built a relationship with our guests and sold with them instead of to them, right? We're talking about low-hanging fruit. Yeah, you get the opportunity. Would you rather, well, let me ask you this. If you know you're going to be stranded on a desert island and you knew that real quick you could just reach up and grab one apple and that's all you could have, or you could just maybe put a little more effort into it and get a bushel or a bucket full of apples, knowing that has to last you for like a week, wouldn't you rather take the bucket? Right? So why not just sort of shift your mind a little bit and start thinking? We don't have time to get into the different strategies for this, but coming from a place of collaboration and abundance is going to serve you so much better than thinking I've got to bring somebody on my podcast and I got to sell and close that person, right? Because that's creating a sales job.
Yeah, I agree. What really does anybody enjoy doing business like that? Take the pressure off yourself as well. It doesn't have to be like that.
Now, of course, there's always an exception. I know somebody's out there going, but what about, yeah, I get it. There's an exception. If you are selling $1 million contracts and you need to speak to the CEO of a $1 billion company to get that $1 million contract signed, and you don't want to go through all the gatekeepers and you want to start a podcast that brings on the $1 billion CEOs who are your perfect clients, to get to know them, to build the relationship so you can present a sales opportunity there. I get it. I get it. That makes sense. But for the majority of, how many of you are out there selling $1 million contracts to $1 billion companies? No. Most of us are consultants, experts, business owners, and coaches. So it makes much more sense to sell one to many. And I'll take this to the next step because there was another question. Like, if we are selling one to many, right? That wasn't part of their question, but they asked, does your system involve booking endless discovery calls to close clients? It's funny because no.
Luckily, no.
No. Yes. Thank goodness. I don't know about how many of you enjoy, I like to call them, enjoy like a fully booked calendar full of bad blind date discovery calls. Yeah. Not me either. Karen's like face says it all, right?
No.
So absolutely not. Why? I'll tell you what I like. I like a fully booked life, not a fully booked calendar. How about you? Right.
Yeah.
So how would you like to know, and I know Karen knows this, and I thought about this because it was funny. I'm gonna save something for a minute, but what we teach in the process, Karen, right, and you've experienced this, is something we call cash infusion days. And yes, you sell people, but you bring them from, but I like to put it this way: you accelerate revenue when you accelerate relationships. So with our process, there are no bad blind date discovery calls because your listeners are getting to know you as listeners. They're coming into your lead flow where they start to get to know you a little bit more, right? They start to get momentum. They move forward. They come to the conclusion. They have their own epiphanies through this process. And then you get to bring them into an experience where you can create transformation, high energy, change lives, and have high ticket sales in bulk versus a fully booked calendar all the time. In fact, I had a call with somebody the other day, and they had this amazing process, and they were going to give it to me, right? Just give it to me and book out my calendar with the perfect leads. And it was only going to be for a commission. And I was like, I could do that. I'm all in, but I don't want to do that because I don't do sales calls anymore. I don't do discovery calls, and I only want to work 3 days a week. So what you have to offer may be amazing and may fully book out my calendar, but I want a fully booked life, right? I would rather do enrollment calls a couple days a month and have the right people who had come to the conclusion. See, I keep using what you said, Karen, because it was so brilliant. Come to the conclusion that they want to take the next step, and that they know that I can help them, and that they know together we can create something good for them, right? We can get them to that aspirational future, that desire that they're looking to do. So for me, it's no, the podcast ATM model that we teach does not do discovery calls. And I've found it much more enjoyable and energetically aligned with what I like to do. Because I don't know about you, Karen. I don't like to try to convince, close, and chase people all the time.
No, it's a lot more fun having an onboarding call than it is running a sales call.
I love that. Yes. Yeah. Isn't it nice when it's like, do you have any more questions? No. How can I start working with you?
Yeah.
Right. That's such a much more enjoyable conversation. And, yeah. And here's the thing that I'll share with you all. When you do, like Karen put this so beautifully earlier, it's the whole process, the whole system from front to end. And it's very simple. It's just a few tweaks here or there we found. And, it just creates such an experience to where they know, like, and trust you at such a higher level than when you just do a bunch of posting on social media, a bunch of cold DMs out there to reach out to them. That nobody's really getting to know you through a social media post. Nobody's getting to know you through your VA pretending they're you, sending out DMs. It's okay. I get it. We've all done these things, and it's things that we do, right, to try to grow our business. But if you truly want the right people in your programs who are the perfect match for you, then I don't think there's any better way than a podcast that has captive attention, that has them in your world, and that can increase the amount of time they spend with you without distraction of social media, without the distraction of YouTube recommending more and more videos of your competitors instead of yours, right? It's like, why not let them just binge your episodes? Give them the opportunity. And that's another thing to think about too, Karen, because if somebody asks the question, how can I keep them listening? Why not create a series of podcast episodes that's almost like a Netflix series, right? Bingeable from one step to the other. Why not turn your lead experience into a bingeable experience versus a one-off transaction? So both of those, I think, are really powerful, and they're part of what podcasting can offer you.
Oh, and that's exactly what this is all about, I suppose. You hit the nail on the head earlier. The thing is with social media is everybody it's almost like they're fighting to be seen, to be heard, right? But the problem is, well, if you're anything like me, you're just scrolling. I scroll through my feeds, and they don't have my attention for the whole time. The beauty of a podcast is they are listening to you in the comfort of their home or their car or the gym, but they are invested in you. They're listening to you. So you're holding the attention. And that's the difference, because everybody is wasting a lot of energy, a lot of time to create the perfect social media post. There isn't one, by the way. There's never going to be one. And they have scrolled already. They've seen it and gone past it. So it is a lot easier to just focus on your podcast. And that way, as you build the listeners, the right people for you, you are holding the attention of the listeners. That's the difference.
Yes, I love that. And, that's one of my favorite things too, because you hit on the holding part, right? Everybody else is trying to get attention. Why don't you be the one that holds their attention? Right? And it's not just Karen and I saying this. Go pick up this book. I use this book all the time. It's a book called Oversubscribed by Daniel Priestley. If you don't take anything away from today's Q&A, except for going to get your VIP ticket at podcastsalesmachine.com and this book, then it'll be a great day for you. It'll be a December 8th, a day of abundance day, right? But this book, Daniel Priestley, he talks about this, what Karen just hit on so beautifully around the holding of attention. And it's not just us saying this. It's not just a new marketing thing we're talking about. There's actual scientific proof that if you spend 7 hours with somebody, that you build a deep human connection and emotional bond, and they don't want to go somewhere else. They want to stay in your world. So when they're like my dog Jelly Bean that sees a squirrel, instead of her jumping after the squirrel, if I had that attention right in front of her and it made that connection, there's a squirrel right in front of your face, she'll never leave that squirrel that's right in front of her face, right, to chase all the other ones. But that's the process, right? That's really a bad analogy, but, or maybe it's not, I don't know. But it's a scientific fact that 7 hours, 11 interactions, 4 different locations, all which can be created quickly and simply through the podcast ATM model. We actually have something we call the immersion conversion vortex, which pulls people into that, because I was so enamored with this scientific principle, knowing that some people call it the Oprah effect. And who here knows that when people get into Oprah, they're into Oprah. They're not going to go chasing Arsenio or whoever the next person is, out there trying to get their attention. They're into Oprah, right? They're going to watch Oprah. They're going to listen to Oprah. They're going to buy the books that Oprah talks about. They're going to watch the movies that she's in. Whatever she recommends, they're doing. That's the power that you can get when you have this kind of system in place. And it starts with your podcast. And for those of you too, it can also be really important when you're doing it as a podcast guest as well. So I know we got to wrap up here soon. And there's one question I want to talk about that I know we get all the time. In fact, excuse me, I actually polled the market and asked them, give me your top 3 priorities. Is it this, this, or this? And for those of you watching, you may have answered this, but the majority of people were like, well, how do I grow my audience? How do I grow my audience? And then the follow-up question, well, that's what they wanted to know, is how to grow it, which is actually okay. It's pretty good. I did a pretty good job of growing an audience organically to 150,000 monthly listeners of our perfect dream clients, of eager buyers. And that's the key. When you grow an audience of eager buyers, you don't have to have 150,000 monthly listeners. You can have a smaller group, because we actually teach a process where it's about relationship, community, and creating this sort of circle of people that just know, like, and trust you and don't want to leave, right? But the other follow-up question, Karen, is, and you touched on this already, do I have to go out and post nonstop on social media? Do I have to do all these low energy, high time activities that just don't produce big results over and over to grow my audience? And what do you think about that question? Because I'm sure you hear that a lot.
Yeah. We still use social media, right? We still do our posts. But here's the thing. If you see our posts on social media, it's pretty much about our podcast. So the beauty is that you're using your one piece of content, whether it's in written form, whether it's in video form, whether it's in audio form, whether it's in the whole thing, whether it's different amount of, 25-second snippets, minutes snippets, whatever it is based on the same thing. Your podcast, which is the vehicle that you're going to use to drive people into your world. So actually, again, going back to simplifying it, you don't need to come up and create a curiosity post and a this kind of post and a that kind of post and a value post. And, oh, what am I going to write about today? Well, you've done your podcast. So turn your podcast into your content to be put out on all social media platforms in different formats. But it's, again, going back to simplifying things. So rather than seeing it, because I think a lot of people see it as, that's another thing I've got to do. Oh, well, I've got to create posts and I've got to create this. I haven't got time to create a podcast. By starting a podcast, we'll simplify the rest of it for you. If that makes sense.
I love that. It's like this. It's like I share the story quite often from the book U Squared, where there's this fly it's over this guy's sitting in a hotel room, and he just hears this buzzing and this bzz, 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 over and over. Notice there's a fly on the windowsill, trying its best, doing its hardest, going, pushing, trying to get through that window. And he knows that while that fly sees that opportunity, is I can get through this eventually, maybe by putting all this effort, energy, and action into it. The fly's probably going to run out of energy and die right there on the windowsill. And here's the crazy thing. Right behind over that guy's shoulder, there are these two massive double doors that are wide open that lead to freedom for that fly. And so what I would share with each of you listening, if you listen to what Karen just shared, she just gave you the biggest sort of flip the script thing, where it wasn't a big complicated way to change your business and to create more time and to create more content. It's actually just flipping it. Do the podcast, allow the podcast to be the production for your short form content, your video content, your written content. And I'll give you I'll share something, because I know Karen maybe don't want to toot her own horn, but she came and taught us in Podcast Profit School the other day this amazing way to use AI to take your transcript, turn it into all these things, and do all that. It was mind blowing. We had people in there that were saying, okay, we would have paid the entire amount of entry just to be in Podcast Profit School for this one thing. So that's how powerful this is. The other thing I'll share, Karen, because we're talking about creating time, is that our methods that we teach, that we used, right? I'm not one of these coaches or consultants that just read something and says, oh yeah, I'm going to start teaching this now, right? We experienced this. We experienced the struggle of not being able to grow our podcast, experience the struggle of not being able to get leads, experience the struggle of not being able to get sales. I know how it feels. I know what you guys are going through if you're struggling with that. And what we did was we did things a little differently, right? But we created an organic, evergreen, proactive audience growth method where you go out and get right in front of your dream clients, plop your organic content that's going to bring them back to you, but you do it once and it produces 24/7, right? It's like the difference of me having to walk every day to the grocery store to buy some oranges, to buy some bananas or whatever. Or instead, why don't I just plant the darn tree in my backyard and let it produce forever, right? So it's the same thing. It's the same. It's just changing. A lot of times you don't know what you don't know, and the answer can be right in front of your face. The solution to your problem, if you don't have a solution right now, could be right in front of your face. And I would be willing to say that 90% of you on here, if you're thinking about launching a podcast, you have a podcast that's not getting an ROI, that little URL that's going across the bottom of the screen is the answer that's staring you right in the face. And I would give it a shot and come to Podcast Sales or come to Podcast Profits Unleashed, but go to podcastsalesmachine.com and get your ticket. So as Karen said, use your podcast to grow your audience, reverse it. Don't spend all that energy time using somebody else's platform where you don't control the engagement. Use your own platform, your own voice to multiply your content from that direction. And then do it in a way that creates evergreen assets that deliver listeners 24/7 from one creation. You plant the one tree, let it produce forever, right? I always love these analogies because of our friend Greg, who's in Podcast Profit School, who has this amazing, go check out the Urban Farm podcast. I'm going to throw him a pitches show for him here. He's an amazing guy, but he has planted these seeds in my mind to use these type of stories. See, I did it again, Greg. I hope you're watching. So I have those questions. Here's one I want to say, because we talked about time. There's another one that comes up a lot, and then I think we're going to probably have to wrap up. But do I need a lot of complicated tech? Do I need to know complicated tech? Do I need to know, have these complicated funnels, all that kind of stuff in order to not only have a podcast, but also to get people from listener to lead to high ticket client? Do you have to have all this complicated systems and funnels and tech and stuff?
Look, you don't have to. What I'm going to say is that back in January, so I really was going to go all in. My podcast wasn't really growing that quickly. I'd been going a couple of years, and I thought, right, I'm going to go all in on this. And I was doing 3 shows a week, 3 60-minute shows. I have to say, if I didn't have the systems in place to automate the process, I would have been working 16-hour days. So again, it's down to utilizing the technology that is out there is going to give you back your time. Now, a lot of people will be like, oh, but I'm not very tech savvy, or, I can't do that. Well, we can do it for you. So there is a way, if tech is not your thing, then I suppose this is what my side of the thing is. We can do all the back end boring stuff so that you don't have to.
And I don't want to give this away, because you got to come to Podcast Profits Unleashed. I've got a really cool exercise I want to take you through that will allow you to come to the conclusion that you're doing too many things and you could be doing so much less and being so much more successful and having a business that's so much more fulfilling. And I think that's the really important part, right? The fulfillment part. But I want to share too, to piggyback on what you said, Karen, because you hit great on the point of the podcast and everything. And then I often hear, well, you got to have this complicated sales funnel and this and that. And can I share something real quick with everybody? When I did the process that you will learn, and we'll actually we're going to help you create the blueprint to start installing the system when you come to Podcast Profits Unleashed. So, you can actually start moving forward with momentum and know what to do, how to do it to get a lot of these results. But when I first discovered this really cool thing where I realized I'm doing way too much, I have too many things out there, too many things I'm trying to do. And it actually got me featured. My story was featured in this book, $1 Million Speaker, because I basically eliminated everything, all the complicated stuff. And it's what we teach as part of our Cash Infusion Day, part of the monetization aspect of getting high ticket sales from your podcast. But I threw out all the funnels. I threw out the CRM, didn't even really know what the heck I was doing. I knew some simple frameworks that are 3-step frameworks, which we share with our clients and we share with people, and we'll share some of them with you at Podcast Profits Unleashed. By knowing that, I threw up a Zoom, invited people to it, didn't even have a CRM, right? Use the Zoom notification reminders to just like click and say, please send this again, so they won't forget that they're supposed to come tomorrow. Please send this confirmation again. But right, I did it like so simple that anybody could do it. In less than 2 weeks, I created my biggest revenue day ever from these prospects that came over into this. No big sales funnel, not a bunch of discovery. I didn't even have sales calls, didn't have to do any of that stuff. And it was really because of the know, like, and trust, and the desire and everything, the relationship that had been created over here, which brought them over here and made this part so much simple. So no, you do not have to have complicated tech, complicated funnels. And we encourage you to find yourself stepping away from feeling like you have to do everything. How many of you feel like I got to do everything? I got to be the one who's, I can't ask for help. I can't do this without doing it myself first, then handing it over to, why are you doing the work twice? Right. I mean, I've been there before. How many of you have felt that way? I'm sure some of you have. You don't have to do that anymore. And you don't have to go figure out how to grow an audience of eager buyers, how to get more leads, how to get more sales all by yourself. You don't have to spend like 10, 11 years or so of your life like I did trying to figure this out, struggling month after month. You can just come spend a few hours with us next week at Podcast Profits Unleashed, and we'll just hand the blueprint to you. So I don't know about you all, but is it worth it if you knew you could come get a system that would give you fulfillment, fun, right? Working with your dream clients, getting rid of the fully booked calendar, having a fully booked life. And instead of having to figure it all out over a process of like 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you could just do it in a couple of hours, and you would just take off like a rocket into 2024 and beyond and start focusing on shining your message and mission out into the world and changing more lives, because you'll have a system in place that's fulfilling and that's aligned with how you like to show up in the world and how you like to serve people. So we hit the hour mark, Karen, so we got to get rolling. Do you have anything you want to, I think we nailed a lot of these questions. I went through and looked at my list. I crossed off almost everything. If anything I missed your question, tag me. I'll answer it in the comments, or we'll answer it at, we'll answer it at Podcast Profits Unleashed.
Yeah. And that is what we said about, a lot of people will put off until the new year, right? Come to the event so that you can hit the ground running in the new year. Because when you have clarity on what needs to be done and you'll get that blueprint. Trust me, when I first came across Evans, it just hit me. It was just, this is a no-brainer. I have been very, very close to burnout. And what this has done for me personally is given me my life back. So definitely worth coming in, having a look for yourself, because I can tell you how great it is. But until you see it for yourself and experience it for yourself, if you are tired of doing all the, spending your life on social media or having all these sales calls with people who aren't ready to buy, then come and have a look at another way. And it's a simpler way, and it's a more fun way. You get to show up as yourself, as you do. I get to show up on my podcast as me. I might be a little bit, all over the place, but I have fun doing it. I get to show up as me, as my authentic self, and you can do the same too. I love the simplicity Evans Putmans brings to life. That's from Kurt. Yeah, that's
Kurt,
it.
Thank you.
It's the simplification of things. So come to the event.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And thank you for all those kind words, Karen, too. And one thing I want to share, can we just tell them, can we give them our like a little something too, just so they'll feel a little better about coming. If you don't feel enough, there might be one might be one thing that's holding you back. And a lot of times I know what it is. I don't want to go to another one of these fluff-filled slide presentation webinar thingy deals where they're going to have a big offer stack and like hard sell me at the end, right? You don't have to worry about, can we just go ahead and tell them there will be no big sales pitch or big offer stack in this, and there will be no slides either.
No.
So, we're going to have fun. It's going to be fun. It's going to be energetic. It's going to be engaging. You will not even realize at a blink of an eye, you'll be like, wow, that has gone on. That has already happened. You'll look down at like one of the people that came before. She's like, I had 23 pages of notes just from the value that was there, all these ahas, all these amazing things that I could now go implement into my business. So you will leave with something. And all we ask is for you just to show up, have a beginner's mind, and engage and be a part of the fun and a part of the process. And I can guarantee you, you will leave a different person than when you came. And whether or not you decide you ever want to talk to Karen and me ever again in your entire life, which we hope you will, we can guarantee you will have the system, the tools, the ahas. You will come to a conclusion on your own that there's a better way to do it, that you can quit flying into that window over and over and over. And you can just take the quantum leap and go out the two big doors that are on the other side and find freedom and fulfillment with your business again. So grab your ticket, podcastsalesmachine.com. We hope we answered your questions today. And if we missed something, please just drop us a comment, tag us. We'll come in and help you out and give you anything. And if you got any questions about the event, drop them in the chat as well. But we appreciate each of you for spending some time with us, and come hang out with us next Tuesday. It'll be fun.